Right, so we're going to have a look at multiplying, dividing by 10, 100 and 1000. So success criteria for this, it looks like a lot but it's very straightforward and you'll figure out what's going on quite quickly when I show you. So ask yourself the two questions, bigger or smaller, how many places? Now how you figure out the answer to these two questions, if you're multiplying, then it's bigger. If you're dividing, then it's smaller. And then by how many places is by how many zeros there are in the number you're multiplying or dividing by. So 10, it would be one place. 100, two places because it's got two zeros. And 1000 would be three. Okay, so that's how you get the answers to these questions. Look at the question, think bigger or smaller, so multiply is bigger, divide is smaller. How many places by how many zeros there are. Then when you've got those two answers, if your answer is bigger, multiply, then add the same number of zeros that's in the question to the end of the number. That's all you do. So at the end, if you're multiplying by 10, you just add 1 zero. If you're multiplying by 100, you'd add 2 zeros to the end, and so forth. Then after you do that, then what you're going to do is then you move the decimal point down the number of places. So the answer to this question, so if it was 2 places, you move the decimal point down 2 places, and then that gives you answer. And then for this part here, it's just the division, so it's the reverse of what you've done for the multiply. If the answer is smaller, then add the same number of zeros, so smaller, which is divide, then add the same number of zeros to the start of the number. So if it's dividing by 100, I'd add 2 zeros to the start of the number. Then move the decimal point up the number of places. So the number of places in this one, if it was 1000, would be 3. So I move the decimal point up 1, 2, 3. And I'll show you what I mean by all this whenever we go through a couple of examples. So first one, 7.3 times 100 and 7.6 times 100 and 7.6 divided by 100. So number one, ask myself, bigger or smaller? So it's going to get bigger. By how many places? It's got 1 zero, so it's going to get bigger by 1 place. So in my head, or even write it down, I know these two answers. So if the answer is bigger, I have to add the same number of zeros to the start of it. So I'm going to write it down here, 7.6. I have to add a 0 to the end of the number. So I'm going to put the 0 here. Then I need to move the decimal point down 1 place. So if I'm multiplying, the decimal point moves down, and this is the number of places it's going to move down. So the decimal point moves from here, get rid of it, and it ends up here. So my answer is 76.0, or let's get in the habit, actually this 0 is worth nothing. So let's just have our answer as 76. Okay. So the same for dividing. Ask yourselves the two questions, bigger or smaller, how many places? So bigger or smaller, it's going to be smaller. How many places? It's going to be 1. So write my number, 7.6. Remember, if the answer is smaller, add the same number of zeros to the start of the number. So I'm going to put my 0 here. Then move the decimal point up the number of places. So my number of places is 1, so I need to move the decimal point up 1 place. So my answer becomes 0.76. Okay, that's all it is. Let's try it with a couple more. So I've got 1.23 times 100, 1.323 divided by 100. So follow the rules. First off, bigger or smaller? Bigger. How many places? It's got 2, so bigger by 2 places. So I'm going to write my number, 1.23. Now, if the answer is bigger, I have to add the same number of zeros to the end of the number. So I'm going to put 2 zeros here, just in case. Okay. Then I need to move the decimal down the number of places that I said. So it needs to move down 2 places. So 1, 2. So it's going to move from here to here, which takes me to 123.00. And like we said, we don't need the 2 zeros, so let's just get rid of them. So my answer would just be 123. And as the more you do this, the more you'll start to get it, and you might not even have to do these things. but you'll just start to figure it out. Remember, move, does it get bigger or smaller? So if it's bigger, then the decimal place moves down, and by how many places is by how many places it's going to move down, how many zeros there are. So 1.23, bigger or smaller? So smaller. How many places? By 2. Okay, so we'll do 1.23. So it's going to get smaller, so I need to add the number of zeros in the question to the start. So I'm going to go 1, 2. Now I know it's going to get smaller by 2 places. So as it gets smaller, decimal point moves up. So I get rid of the decimal point from that. 1, 2. And my decimal point ends up here. So my answer is 0.0123. And that's why we add those zeros on. Sometimes you don't need them, sometimes you do. It's good just to have them in case. Let's do 2 more, dividing, multiplying by 1,000. So 9.73 times 1,000. So first off, bigger or smaller? So I know it's bigger. How many places? I know it's 3. So I'm going to write my number, 97.3. Then I add the same number of zeros to the end of the number. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Might need them, might not, but it's best to have them. Now I know if it's bigger, that the decimal point is going to move down the way, and I know I have to move it 3 places. So I'll go 1, 2, 3. So my decimal point will end up here, and my answer will be 97,300. And there is a 0.0 in the end, but we know that's not worth anything, so we can just have this as our answer. And let's do our division. So again, bigger or smaller? So I know it's going to get smaller. Again, how many number of places? Number of zeros by 3 places this time. So write the number. Let's go 97.3. Now I need to add the number of zeros that is in the question to the start of my number. So I've got 3 zeros. I need to put that at the start of the number. And if it's getting smaller, that means that the decimal point moves up the way, and it's going to get smaller by 3. So I'm going to move the decimal point up 3. 1, 2, 3. So put my decimal point in, get rid of it here. So I don't need this number. So my answer would be 0.0973. And that's how you would multiply and divide by 10, 100 and 1,000.